When you tick off the name of the candidate you support, is race a factor? What about the so-called Americanness? Well, you may say no, but a new study by researchers affiliated with 2 US universities shows subconscious biases do play a part in our choices. It uses what it calls the implicit association test. Take a look at some of the key findings. Now, first, a black candidate may be implicitly conceived of as being less American than a white candidate. And second, the more the candidates are construed as embodying the American identity, the more they're likely to be actively supported. Well, let's delve deeper into this topic, shall we? I'm joined now by 2 of the study's authors. In Chicago, Debbie Marsh. She's a doctoral student at the University of Chicago. And in San Diego, Thierry Devos. He's an associate professor of psychology at San Diego State University. Debbie, let's start off with this report and how it was put together. Why look at the issue of race and its association with Americanness? Because I think many people internationally watching this might be surprised that we're talking like this in the year 2008.
Thierry, do you want to go ahead and answer that question?
Sure. This is something that we started to do research on long before the political campaign. So we had documented that the American identity is more strongly linked to white Americans than to members of ethnic minorities, such as Asian Americans, Latino Americans, and African Americans. And at that point in our program of research, we thought that it would be important to look whether this also played a role in the political campaign. And as you just mentioned, we did find strong evidence that when we see Barack Obama as an African American, we tend to see him as less American than white candidates such as John McCain, Hillary Clinton, and even Tony Blair, who at the time was the Prime Minister of the UK.
Debbie, did your research delve into why people might hold this bias when they're looking at race?
Right. So the particular studies that we conducted don't really examine why this happens, but we do have some guesses as to why such associations could be done more quickly for white candidates versus black candidates. And that has a lot to do with the kind of cultural stakes that we hold. It's not altogether surprising given the history of immigration in the United States, a history of slavery, history of Japanese internment and things like that, and the way that the media more readily associates and makes salient white Americans relative to ethnic minorities in the United States.
Thierry, we will find out on Election Day, on November the 4th, Tuesday, 4 days from now, whether race really is a card that might have an impact on this election. Is there, though, anything that can be done as a psychologist to change people's behaviour?
Well, in my opinion, the first important step is to maybe increase our awareness to those implicit or subtle biases. You know, if you look at people's conscious beliefs and attitude, you could say that they are where we want them to be. Most people strongly subscribe to ideas of equality, of social justice. They strongly endorse the idea that we should not discriminate people based on the color of their skin. And what our research shows, and research of many other social psychologists, is that at a more unconscious, automatic level, there are still very strong, pervasive biases, not only based on race, but also based on gender, age, sexual orientation, and so on. So becoming aware of those discrepancies is actually probably a first step to take further action, to motivate us to do something about those subtle biases.
Back to the conclusions of the study, Debbie, a black candidate is implicitly conceived of as being less American than a white candidate when perceivers focus on the target's ethnicity. This effect, though, is reduced when you're looking at the target's personal identity or gender, and when you emphasize those 2 issues. Can you just explain what you mean by that, or what we might perceive as important out of that?
Right. So basically the task we use asks people to make very quick, automatic categorizations of images of things related to the U.S. and foreign, and images of the political candidates. And when they make those categorizations based on racial categories, and race is what the salient feature is, they are more quick to associate American images with whites relative to those same images with black candidates. But when we shift the focus and change the way that the candidates are construed, making maybe gender more salient or personal identity, such as the names Barack Obama or John McCain, this bias tends to be eliminated. So we no longer see an offset of this kind of bias.
Finally, guys, to both of you here, and I'll ask you this first, Thierry, and then we'll come to you, Debbie, for your final thoughts. But as a psychologist, certainly as just a viewer, as a lay viewer of this this study, it's fascinating. As a psychologist, were you surprised by the results?
To some extent, yes. You know, when you consider that, Barack Obama is a very prominent American, he might be about to become the first African-American president. I was surprised that even in those cases, he was still not seen as American as other political candidates, or not even as American as a foreigner, such as Tony Blair. So I keep being struck by those discrepancy between our conscious and unconscious thoughts.
Yeah, and just to reinforce that, Thierry, the idea that Barack Obama is less American than Tony Blair seems quite remarkable. Debbie, your last thoughts?
Just final thoughts are that a lot of things can be done to change the way that we have these, or change our unconscious associations. So as Thierry said, the first step, becoming aware that we have these associations. And one of the ways you can actually do that is to go online and take one of these IAT tests. So you can just go to any search engine and type in Project Implicit, and you can do any number of these association tests, and then to put yourself in more situations where you can undo those cultural stereotypes I was talking about. So that might be very uncomfortable at first, but it's an important step to eliminating these sorts of biases.
And let me tell you, in the newsroom, we have done it, and it is an illuminating process. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. And you have questions?